This anime begins with 3 players fighting a snake monster with a samurai body. Then, because of the monster's agility and extraordinary attack power, the 3 people were overwhelmed by him. But suddenly, another player appeared who with just one slash managed to defeat the monster. The scene moved to Asuna's residence, who is the daughter of a wealthy man and always lives a well-off life. However, as the saying goes, money cannot buy happiness. It can be seen that the relationship between Asuna and her mother is a little less getting along, where the mother's disposition of never being satisfied or never praising the results achieved by her daughter makes breakfast together that morning feel less pleasant. Upon arriving at school, Asuna is a friendly and easy person to get along with those around her, which is the opposite of one female student named SAO Misumi. She is the smartest student of their ranks and has an aura that makes her feel difficult to approach. However, Misumi is actually a pro player or street fighter and often wins several competitions in the game center, which Asuna happens to see, so that a relationship between gamers occurs. Because the SAO game is about to be released, Misumi invites Asuna to play, but Asuna is remembered by her mother, who will definitely not allow it. Upon her return home, when she happened to enter her brother's room, Asuna found a nerve gear complete with SAO games that made her dark-eyed and wanted to try the game. When Asuna entered the game world, she, who is a newbie, was amazed to see how realistic the world was. Soon she was approached by a guide who was in charge of explaining about the game. Then Asuna presumptuously said that she was looking for her friend named Misumi. However, as we know that few players use real names when playing online games, and although there are definitely more who use fake names, this turned out to be done by Misumi as well. Unexpectedly, a player appeared who claimed to be Misumi and asked Asuna to stop asking her real name. Of course, as a veteran who plays online games, Misumi explained that her name in the game is Mido, and then she took Asuna around to introduce the SAO game in more detail. Then they went to the city to buy weapons and continued to go around the city until the afternoon. This is where the unforgettable moment of all SAO viewers, which is when Asuna wants to log out, but suddenly does not find the button as well as Mido. At the same time, glowing particles appeared covering their bodies, which when they opened their eyes had been teleported to the city center, and a figure appeared who explained that they would not be able to log out before successfully completing 100 floors, and if they were forcibly removed or died in the game, a global strike will immediately electrocute their brains to death. And as a form of final farewell, players are also given an item in the form of a mirror that instantly makes people there appear in their original form, including Mido. Sure enough, after hearing the announcement, there was immediately a great commotion and made the survival instincts of the righteous people tested, where when they saw the figure leave, Mido also invited Asuna to leave because she knew that the women's area around the city would soon be invaded, which was certainly not worth it for her level. Then Asuna, who is anxious and afraid, has not been able to accept the fact that she must be trapped into a death game. But thanks to the presence of Mido, who promised to always be beside her, Asuna was finally able to rise from the slump. Some time passed. It turned out that Asuna was being trained by Mido to fight against monsters, and had difficulties at the beginning because she had never held a sword before. However, thanks to the influence of her athletic body, Asuna was finally able to master how to bring out the sword skills, from which they fought hard together to raise the level so that they could survive while increasing the chances of life in the game. Until they arrived in the dungeon, and this is where Asuna would see something in the chest for the first time, which was fortunate that she was immediately prevented by Mido when she was about to open a treasure chest that was suspected to be a trap. However, the fate of the other players was not as lucky as they were, which made them beaten by monsters to death. And Asuna and Mido, who saw it, could do nothing but hide and leave. The next day, when they were hunting monsters around the abyss, Mido, seeing a rare monster, made her tempted and decided to part with Asuna for a while. But that's a big mistake that shouldn't be made, which by single-handedly Asuna can defeat monsters easily, but instead attacks one monster that has the ability to summon other monsters until it instantly makes her besieged. Meanwhile, Mido, who was about to help her, accidentally fell to the bottom of the abyss and made the two of them separate. Suddenly, seeing Asuna's experience point that was getting thinner automatically forced Mido to rush back upstairs. However, Mido also had to pass a hard obstacle, namely fighting countless monsters, which also made his experience point even more drained. Meanwhile, Asuna's condition is getting worse. although she successfully fought the monster. But suddenly a mini-boss appeared which made Asuna's situation even more urgent. Plus Mido, who couldn't afford to see Asuna die in front of her eyes, spontaneously disbanded their party, and then ran away by herself. This is where Kirito then appears, who fights back. Kirito is a solo player but managed to defeat the monster without being injured in the slightest. Asuna, who was shocked to see him, couldn't say anything. Upon returning to the inn, Asuna was disappointed because she was betrayed by her own best friend. Plus, hearing that many other players had died in this game made her lose her will to live. However, even though she knew she would die, at least she had decided to die in her own way, by fighting monsters to the last drop of blood, and this is where she met Kirito again. However, Kirito didn't realize that the person in front of him was Asuna. Then, as a fellow player, Kirito suggested to Asuna to return to the city to replenish supplies. However, Asuna, who had made up her mind to die, ignored his orders, so that she, who was basically exhausted, fell unconscious. And when she opened her eyes, there was Kirito next to her, which was where their closeness started. Then Kirito also invited her to attend an association that discussed the discovery of the floor boss. There was also Mido, and the association was led by a beta tester named Diable, where he suggested forming a committee of 6 people to increase life opportunities. Kirito, who is a solo player, was forced to make a party with Asuna. That night, while everyone was having a party before fighting it out for the next day, Asuna was sitting alone in a corner eating bread. Before long, she was approached by Kirito and distributed cream to her. It didn't stop there. Kirito also offered to spend the night at the NPC's house that he rented because it had many facilities, especially the bathroom, which suddenly made Asuna want to come along. Long story short, when she arrived at the house, Asuna was moved because after a long time she was finally able to take a shower. While walking to where the boss is, Kirito also explains the strategy in which they will attack the small monsters so that the main team can focus on facing the boss. However, Asuna's attention was only on Mido. Even when she was at the boss door, she was still staring at the girl. The boss's body looks very six-pack, but regardless of the boss's body, the players attack so that the fight breaks out between them. And according to Diable's direction, there are those who are tasked with fighting his men, and there are also those who surround the boss from all directions. Thanks to their cooperation, the boss's life is now only 1 bar away. However, this is where the real terror has just begun, where the boss suddenly changes his weapon to a large sword, even being able to use a sword skill that Diable certainly hasn't anticipated, thus causing him to be hit hard by the monster. But when Kirito was about to give him strength, Diable refused and gave him a final message. Suddenly, with the loss of their leader, the players lost the will to win. However, not with Mido, where even though she was alone, she continued to fight until Asuna's heart was moved to help. And after seeing Asuna's skill, Mido realized that that person was her best friend she had left behind. Without any anger, Asuna apparently forgave her. But the main focus right now was helping Kirito, who was fighting the boss alone. Quickly, Asuna rushed forward and managed to land an attack on the boss, and it was here that Kirito realized that Asuna was the one he had saved in the past. For a moment, Kirito couldn't believe what he saw. But since the boss was still standing tall in front of them, the battle had to continue, where it was thanks to Kirito's combination of attacks that opened up his opponent's defenses. Followed by an attack from Asuna, it also managed to drain the boss's experience point to the red position. At the same time, the boss used a trick to attack Kirito and then thin out his blood as well. Then Mido appeared, who was also dying. However, trying to buy time by clashing skills against the boss, and that managed to give Kirito and Asuna the final blow. In the end, the boss was defeated. But even though they have won, there are players who do not accept Diable's death and then provoke other players by blaming the beta testers. In order to protect beta testers like Mido, Kirito is willing to take on the role of a villain until a legendary nickname appears, namely as a cheater. The story ends by showing Asuna, who decides to part with Mido because she feels she has found a new purpose in life. which she deliberately follows Kirito to the next floor, and their adventure continues. What do you think about the anime we discussed? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel by activating the bell to receive notifications for the next video here on the anime storyline. Thank you.